Crown of Thorns and Desire takes place in a vast kingdom full of political intrigue, forbidden desires, and deadly schemes, and it follows the story of a woman whose beauty and intellect enthrall everyone, but also put her in the middle of deadly power struggles. Her attractiveness becomes both her most potent weapon and her worst curse as she goes from being an ordinary girl to becoming a notable figure in the royal court. She must negotiate a network of alliances, betrayals, and secret plans as she is caught between the aims of princes, ministers, and rulers, all while maintaining her decency and survival. Her heart is torn between two men in the middle of the chaos, one whose love is as overpowering as fire, and the other whose love is as tender as water. However, in a world where allegiance might alter with a simple cut, can love ever be trusted? Her choices will decide not just her future but the course of an entire nation as it approaches the edge of war. Episode 1. Enthusiasm. On a winter afternoon, the cold wind howled as a small truck marked with a red cross slowly made its way down a bumpy road. Sitting by the window was a delicate girl, her jet-black hair shiny and braided into two thick twists that hung down her slender chest. She had large eyes, reminiscent of the classical beauties in American ink paintings, filled with a spirit of beauty, though her complexion was slightly yellow. The jolting of the truck had just made her vomit. She gripped the seat's handle tightly with one hand while the other held onto a first aid kit resting on her knee. A Red Cross armband adorned her arm, still new and creased, indicating that she was a newly appointed nurse. However, she was not a qualified nurse. She had lied during her application. She was not a medical major graduate but had only attended a medical course for less than a semester at a college in the United States. Due to the increasingly tense situation across Europe and the overwhelming number of people in need of assistance, the Red Cross was severely understaffed, and only a novice like her could take on this mission. Fortunately, she was merely an assistant, paired with a trustworthy partner. Dr. Harrison is an American who graduated from a well-known medical school. He was tall, handsome, and kind, the ideal figure in the eyes of the girl. "Feeling better, Gianna?" Dr. Harrison asked, his bright blue eyes filled with concern. "Our mission is very dangerous. Just focus on your job, distributing medicine and food to the prisoners in the camp. It's best not to get involved in anything else." "I understand, Dr. Harrison. I will complete the mission," the girl nodded. Gianna was her English name. Her South African name was Enchalikanyi. 3 years ago, Nhanyi boarded an oil tanker and arrived in America, across the ocean, to study ballet, piano, and composition at a church school. Growing up, she had always followed her father's wishes, and as the days passed, she felt her thoughts becoming richer, sensing that she should do something. So, she secretly slipped out of the piano classroom to audit medical courses at another university and even signed up for the International Red Cross Rescue Team, all without her family's knowledge. Her parents and relatives had no idea she was no longer in America but in war-torn Europe. Dr. Harrison smiled as he continued to drive, observing the charming and lovely girl, full of enthusiasm but lacking experience, which made him subtly worried. "We're almost there. Gianna, remember my words, be careful." The truck entered the gates of the concentration camp and stopped in front of the guard post. "Don't worry, I'll handle them," Dr. Harrison said, turning off the engine and getting out of the truck. She looked out the window as Dr. Harrison was negotiating with the guards, holding his documents. Two armed soldiers approached her, one of them pointing a bayonet at her. "Ma'am, your documents." Enhanyi took out her prepared pass and identification, handing them to the soldier. He examined them carefully, as if trying to memorize every word, scrutinizing her photo with his gray eyes. After returning the documents, he stood at attention and saluted her. "Ma'am, please get out of the vehicle, entry here is on foot." She slung the first aid kit over her shoulder and followed the tall Dr. Harrison through the camp's gates. Above, the sky was filled with electric wires, and sentries with guns were stationed at the watchtowers in each corner, scanning the area. Harrison turned back to her, offering a reassuring smile and patting her frail shoulder. She forced a smile in return, relieved that she was entering as a Red Cross worker and not as a prisoner. The winter sun shone warmly on the ground, but the atmosphere here was eerily silent, a deathly quiet. "I'll be responsible for distributing supplies to the male prisoners, you will handle the female prisoners." These supplies were gathered with great difficulty by the President, and we must ensure that each item reaches the prisoners' hands, Dr. Harrison said, looking into her dark eyes, still worried as he added, "After distributing the supplies, we will meet here. Gianna, be careful." Enhanyi nodded as a soldier led her to the separate camp for female prisoners. She was greeted by a young brown-haired, blue-eyed female officer, who had an oval face and a long neck, embodying the classic European beauty in her fitted black uniform skirt that accentuated her curvaceous figure. However, her beautiful eyes revealed a chilling, ruthless glint. "Lieutenant. I am Lieutenant Margaret, here to assist you," the officer said arrogantly. "My soldiers will bring the supplies in. You could just drop them off and leave, but you insisted on distributing them yourselves." She pointed her steel whip at a long wooden table. "Right here, I will have the prisoners brought out." "Thank you," Enhanyi replied coldly. Although she was not interested in politics, she felt no goodwill towards these Nazis, who were fanatical and extreme, building concentration camps to imprison war captives and political dissidents. She lowered her head, silently organizing the supplies, unpacking boxes, and neatly placing the compressed biscuits and canned goods on the table, preparing the sign-in record. The officer's eyes remained fixed on Enhanyi, making her feel uncomfortable under that gaze. She tried to ignore it, diligently completing her duties and distributing food to the incoming prisoners. The female prisoners formed long lines, entering one by one with their heads down, like wandering souls, taking the compressed biscuits and cans from the table before exiting again. The atmosphere was stifling, and Enhanyi fought back tears as she distributed and recorded each item. Suddenly, she noticed a blonde girl in the crowd, strikingly beautiful but with a pale face, clutching her chest and trembling. "Wait, miss." Enhanyi's German was not very fluent, so she spoke in English, hoping the girl would understand. "Are you hurt?" The girl looked indifferent, seemingly unable to comprehend her words. Enhanyi switched to German. "Are you hurt? Mind your own business. You filthy pig, get lost!" Margaret shouted, striking the girl's arm with her whip. The girl recoiled in fear, not taking her share of food. "Stop!" Enhanyi rushed out from behind the table, blocking the girl who was trying to escape, pulling her in front of Lieutenant Margaret. "She is clearly bleeding." "Is she?" Lieutenant Margaret glanced at her dismissively. Enhanyi insisted, "This is inhumane. I need to bandage her immediately." "Do as you wish," the female officer scoffed, walking out of the room. The girl stood trembling in place as Enhanyi gently unbuttoned her clothing. The sight before her shocked her. The girl's body was bruised and swollen, with marks from being whipped. God, what caused these horrific injuries? Enhanyi opened the first aid kit, carefully treating the wounds. After bandaging, the girl clutched her food and quickly ran out. Enhanyi gradually realized that many women were in similar situations. As long as they were young and beautiful, their chests bore varying degrees of whip marks. She treated each one, cleaning, applying medicine, and bandaging their wounds. Time passed unnoticed, and the evening sun slanted through the window, illuminating her black hair and golden face. At that moment, she felt like a true angel of mercy, despite the many injured and horrific wounds around her. She overcame her inner anger and fear, knowing she was doing what needed to be done, not performing a ballet on stage or playing a piano piece purely for enjoyment, but something profoundly meaningful. Her medical kit did not contain enough supplies, and soon one roll of bandage was used up. Enhanyi opened the door, and the guard soldier raised his gun warily at her. She steadied herself and said with righteous conviction, "I need to see Lieutenant Margaret. Please ensure she provides some medical supplies for me to bandage them." "Supplies? There are no extra supplies here," the female officer's voice came, cold and dismissive. All afternoon, Enhanyi had been busy working without a sip of water. Her throat felt dry, and her voice was hoarse, but she continued to argue, "I have reason to believe that the prisoners here have been subjected to inhumane treatment." "Are you threatening me?" Lieutenant Margaret's eyes held disbelief, followed by a cold laugh. That laughter sent chills down Enhanyi's spine. "It's hard to imagine that you are also a nurse. Haven't you taken an oath? The duty of a nurse is to save lives." "All right, miss, what supplies do you need?" Lieutenant Margaret said, her beautiful brown eyes fixed on Enhanyi's fair face. Enhanyi was taken aback by the sudden change in her attitude. "I need gauze, alcohol, and iodine." "All right, wait here." Most precious. It hurt, her head hurt so much that it felt as if it had been filled with glue. Enhanyi struggled to remember that she had just been in the infirmary, distributing food and canned goods to the female prisoners, until Lieutenant Margaret came in. She had smelled a strong odor of ether, and then she remembered nothing. Oh God! She wanted to cry. Where was she? What had that female demon done to her? She had been innocently imprisoned in a cell, her nurse's uniform was gone, replaced by a thin, gray-striped prison outfit. All around her were women dressed in the same gray-striped prison garb, young and old, all staring at her with pairs of indifferent, hollow eyes. This was a place more terrifying than hell. Dr. Harrison, save me, she helplessly pounded on the iron bars. But no one paid attention to her cries, and by the time her voice was hoarse, no one had come in. After being starved for 2 whole days, her head was spinning, and she saw stars. She had once distributed food and medicine to these female prisoners, but now she was enduring hunger, and these old and young women had expressions so indifferent that none showed any intention of gratitude. Just when Enhanyi felt utterly hopeless, a cold, haughty female voice rang out above her. How is it? Is the taste of hunger pleasant? Enhanyi looked up in the direction of the voice, and sure enough, it was that female demon, Lieutenant Margaret, the guard of the concentration camp. Her legs felt weak from hunger, and she had no strength left, but she still mustered her last bit of courage to say, "What you are doing to me is illegal." "Humph, you do have some spirit. Let's see whether the whip is harder or your mouth is harder." Margaret swung the steel whip in her hand, and with a sharp crack, it struck her, instantly slicing open a wound on her delicate arm, blood flowing freely. "Ah!" she cried out in pain, clutching her arm. Lieutenant Margaret followed up with another lash, but this time, Enhanyi managed to dodge it by sheer luck. Margaret felt somewhat unsatisfied, rushing forward to grab her hair. Unlike the other female prisoners, Enhanyi had 2 thick, black braids, which were easily grasped in Margaret's hand. "Ah! My hair!" Enhanyi's hair was tightly pulled by this witch, and 2 strong female guards assisted in tearing at her clothes, forcibly dragging her out of the cell and into a small room at the end of the corridor. Margaret had somehow found a pair of large black scissors, and with a snip, she cut off Enhanyi's thick, black braid. Enhanyi watched in anguish as her most precious, cloud-like long hair was severed, and she held the half of her hair in her hands, sobbing. Her body and hair were given to her by her parents, yet this female demon so lightly tormented her hair. The black braid twirled in Margaret's hand as she raised the steel whip again. "Lieutenant, Dr. Jackson has arrived," a female guard came in to report. "You're lucky this time, I'll teach you a lesson later," Margaret coldly said, turning to leave the room. The door opened slightly, and Lieutenant Margaret stood at the doorway speaking with a tall man. Enhanyi couldn't see the man's face, but she could see the vicious expression on the female officer's face, her beautiful brown eyes glaring at her with a wolf-like ferocity. "All right, then I'll hand her over to you. Just so you know, this female prisoner has just arrived and hasn't been registered yet. Also, her brain seems to have some issues. She keeps deluding herself into thinking she is a nurse." "Thank you so much, my laboratory needs a nurse." The man's voice sounded strange. "Liquid." Enhanyi didn't have time to understand what was happening before several female guards bound her up and forcibly loaded her onto a truck. This time she was taken to a smaller concentration camp, where she didn't have to starve. There were 3 meals a day with meat, bread, vegetables, and fruits, and she even received some coffee and chocolate. The girls here were all very young and beautiful, each locked in solitary cells. Enhanyi couldn't believe that the witch had sent her here out of a sudden pang of conscience. This villa-like concentration camp seemed calm and peaceful, yet it felt like it was brewing some enormous conspiracy. The camp's military doctor and head was named Dr. Jackson. He was very tall, with a long scar running down the left side of his face. The first time Enhanyi saw him, she could hardly bear to look at that scar, which looked as if it had been burned by acid, terrifying and grotesque. She covered her mouth to stifle a scream. "I hear you are a nurse." Enhanyi nodded in fear. Dr. Jackson revealed a gentle smile. "I need your assistance to help me with some work." Faced with that terrifying face, Enhanyi shook her head without thinking. "I am an intern nurse with the Red Cross. I will not assist you in any inhumane activities." Dr. Jackson continued to smile. "Don't worry. It's just to clean up some hygiene and medical instruments. Besides, do you have a choice?" Thus, Enhanyi was taken out and locked in the laboratory, which was filled with many medical instruments and various animal specimens. For several days, she was forced to clean and tidy up these things. At night, she would be taken back to her cell by the guard soldiers. This place looked no different from the medical laboratory and specimen room at the university where Enhanyi had studied, except that she was not allowed to enter the innermost room. While cleaning the outer room, Enhanyi often heard sounds coming from inside, sounds of doors opening, footsteps, and doors closing. She suspected there must be another passageway there. Perhaps that passage could lead her to escape. This bold thought gradually formed in her mind, and she carefully observed the times when sounds came from inside. She arrived at the laboratory half an hour early one day, and the room inside was quiet. Enhanyi knew the time had come. She quietly pushed the door to the room, and to her surprise, it was not locked. The room had no windows and was pitch dark. She groped for the switch in the corner, and when the light turned on, she saw a surgical table in the middle of the room, with the walls lined with wigs of various colors: brown, blonde, silver. As Enhanyi carefully examined these hairs, she suddenly discovered a shocking fact: they were not wigs but real human hair, and the hair was not fixed with rubber caps but with human scalps. Some were already shriveled, while others still oozed traces of blood. She immediately felt a chill run through her body, her scalp tingling, and she covered her mouth to keep herself from screaming. This Dr. Jackson was a complete pervert. Ah! She could no longer bear the fear inside her and let out a scream. Dr. Jackson discovered her, grabbing her hair and dragging her out from under the table. "Look at this beautiful hair, like a black waterfall." "No, please don't," and Hanyi trembled all over, realizing that this perverted doctor would surely strip her of her scalp. She now understood why Lieutenant Margaret had not personally tormented her but had sent her to the doctor. Her long, cloud-like black hair was exactly what this perverted doctor loved. Her hair had already been unevenly cut, half taken by that female demon. Dr. Jackson tenderly trembled as he stroked her hair. "What a pity, it's not complete, but as long as it's well nourished, it will grow back soon." Dr. Jackson poured a bottle of green liquid over her head. "Ah!" She let out a piercing scream, thinking that it was all over now. This must be acid, and her face would become like his ghastly visage. And Hanyi was so frightened that she fainted. Demons! Kenyi's consciousness was hazy, as if she were dreaming of her father and mother back home, the professors and friends from the American church school, and Dr. Harrison. She knew her mind was awake, but she was unwilling to open her eyes, for upon doing so, all she would see was horror akin to hell. She found herself in a vast factory, tightly bound to a chair with hemp ropes. Fortunately, her clothes were intact, her hair had not been cut, and her face was normal, but this did not allow Kenyi to breathe a sigh of relief, for in this factory gathered more than a dozen Nazi officers, each dressed in black military coats. Some were chatting in small groups, while others occasionally glanced at her, including Dr. Jackson. She was like a lamb among a pack of wolves. The officer sitting in the center on a black chair wore a splendid uniform, his long legs crossed. Gradually, she made out his features. If she had seen him in a different context, she might have naively thought he was a Hollywood movie star. During her time at the church school, she often went to the movies with friends. The cinema's entrance would be adorned with movie posters featuring handsome men and beautiful women, but none of those top stars could compare to him even in the slightest. He was tall, his long black coat reaching just below his knees, with a high collar framing a sharp chin, his features distinct, resembling a perfect classical sculpture. His delicate and unique facial features included a straight nose, thin lips, and a pair of deeply set, melancholic eyes, their pupils a chilling blue, as cold as ice. No woman could resist his allure, for those ice-blue eyes seemed capable of capturing one's soul. But this was not Hollywood, it was a Nazi camp. If those men in black uniforms were wolves, then he was the king of beasts, the leader of demons. She did not understand the military ranks of these Nazis, only that his splendid black uniform was adorned with various badges. Dr. Jackson seemed to be crawling beneath his long boots to highlight his nobility. "Look, she is an angel from the West," Dr. Jackson said with a fawning expression. "If you are satisfied, I will present her to you." Doctor, you know my preference, he spoke, his voice chilling to the bone. Of course, General Ryan, you only desire virgins. Then is she a virgin? I can guarantee she is very intact. If you don't believe me, you can verify it yourself. Two white-coated military doctors held her down as she struggled and shouted, "Let me go. I am a Red Cross nurse. I am not a prisoner of war." Dr. Jackson, how do you explain this? General, I apologize. This female prisoner has been saying this since she arrived at the camp. I am not entirely clear on the specifics, Dr. Jackson replied somewhat awkwardly. Let me go. I told you, I am a Red Cross nurse. You demons! A woman of unknown origin, General Ryan stared at her from a distance. Under the gaze of those ice-blue eyes, Kenyi felt a fear she had never experienced before. Soon, the camp's administrator, Lieutenant Margaret, arrived as ordered. As soon as she entered, she saw him. His military rank was not what attracted her most, it was his face, a face with a deadly allure for women. You are Margaret? The recipient of the Iron Cross, he squinted his ice-blue eyes and asked. Red Cross? Yes, sir, Margaret replied, her red lips moving as she tried to push her ample chest forward, the Iron Cross gleaming even brighter. She had heard of this devilish general, a legendary figure in the SS, the youngest and most handsome officer, but she had never seen him in person. She never expected to be fortunate enough to meet him today, thanks to this foolish girl. Very well, the camp will remember your achievements, he nodded. Thank you, sir. She gazed at him, her brown eyes filled with smiles, her legs together, standing straight, while inside she was restless, wishing to climb into his bed immediately. However, General Ryan only glanced at her once, his attention remained focused on Kenyi. Lieutenant, according to this lady, she is a member of the Red Cross. Sir, this female prisoner has issues, Margaret smiled at him, gesturing to her own head. No, she is lying. I am not a prisoner of war. My name is Gianna, and I am a nurse for the International Red Cross. Crazy woman, are you still not awake? Spouting nonsense in front of the general, Margaret stepped forward, shoving Kenyi's shoulder. Bound as she was, she could only retaliate with words, I am not crazy, you are the one who is insane. You abuse women in the camp who are prettier than you. It was because I stopped you that you took revenge and locked me up. You crazy woman! Enraged, Margaret raised her hand to slap her, but just as she lifted her arm, she was suddenly seized by a powerful grip. Following that immense, irresistible force, she looked over to see a hint of a smile on General Ryan's handsome lips. She stared in a daze. Sir, please let me teach this ungrateful woman a lesson. Enough. At his gentle interruption, Margaret had no choice but to lower her arm. She is abusing prisoners of war. The Red Cross will expose these matters, and international public opinion will condemn your atrocities." Kanye gasped as she finished speaking. She saw Dr. Jackson and Lieutenant Margaret exchange glances, their eyes filled with mockery and disdain. General Ryan's ice-blue eyes once again focused on Kanye. She had fallen into a den of demons. Everyone before her was a devil, and there was no reason for these demons. "You are all devils. Let me go. Let me go." No matter how she struggled, she was forcibly pressed onto the operating table by two military doctors in white coats. Her hands were secured to the iron rings on the table with ropes, her legs spread apart and tightly bound. A sponge was stuffed into her mouth, silencing her cries, and she could only sob helplessly, feeling like a sacrificial offering on an altar, with no chance of resistance among these demons. Each one of them was an extreme pervert. The concentration camp guard, Lieutenant Margaret, was a venomous female friend who specialized in torturing prisoners, and she was grinning wickedly at her. Dr. Jackson was even worse, a fetishist and impotent man, his terrifyingly decayed face displaying a look of desire. The one approaching the operating table was the incredibly handsome General Ryan. His ice-blue eyes appeared above her, and even from this angle, seeing his sharp chin and prominent Adam's apple, he was still very handsome. But in Kenyi's heart, she could no longer care about such things. In her eyes, he was a beast clad in a handsome human skin. "It seems the nurse is quite agitated. Perhaps it is too hot here, and she needs someone to help cool her down," General Ryan said as he took a pair of white medical gloves from a white tray held by a nearby doctor, skillfully slipping his long fingers into the gloves. Her mouth was blocked, unable to make a sound, but her eyes saw him pick up the surgical scissors from the white tray. He bent down, as if an archaeologist examining a newly unearthed artifact, his eyes filled with focused intent. She could hear the sound of fabric being cut, snip, snip, his movements with the scissors resembling a tailor measuring fabric, except the tailor's purpose was to sew her clothes, while he was cutting her prison uniform into tatters. She could only choose to close her eyes to avoid the ruthless scrutiny from his ice-blue eyes. Trembling beneath his gaze. Recognition. She did not receive her clothes, not even the prisoner's outfit she had before. Her prison uniform had been cut into strips by that general and thrown into the trash. She was brought into this ancient castle-like house. In this small room on the top floor, the only thing she could use to cover herself was the bed sheet, which she draped over her body. He knocked a few times on the door, though the knocking was merely symbolic. Without waiting for her to speak, he pushed the door open. He had changed out of his black trench coat and wore only the white shirt from his uniform, without the large black cap. His ear-length golden hair curled in beautiful waves, shining in the sunlight streaming through the skylight, and his handsome face remained unchanged, but she knew all too well the devilish heart he possessed. She retreated to the far corner of the room, her dark eyes fixed on him. Although she was terrified inside, she forced herself to appear calm. He expressed some dissatisfaction with her covering, speaking in a commanding tone, "Take off the bed sheet." "No, please don't," she refused vehemently. A slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and his tone softened a bit. "I've already seen your body, so there's no need to be shy." The humiliation from the operating table resurfaced in her mind, and she shouted even more fiercely, "No, you despicable, shameless devil!" His smile froze on his face, and he said coldly, "It seems I must teach you what obedience means." She turned her head away, intending to disdain his threat, but in that instant, the gun at his waist was drawn, the cold, slender barrel pressed against her forehead. She immediately felt her limbs turn cold, her brain unable to think, unable to believe that her youthful life was about to be extinguished under this icy gun barrel. She trembled and closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. He sneered, "Feeling scared now? I thought you had some unbreakable faith." With a dull thud, followed by a series of crisp sounds. "Ah!" She closed her eyes and let out a sharp scream. However, the bullet fired from his gun did not pierce her head, instead, it shattered the large mirror behind her. The glass broke into countless pieces, falling around her. Before she could catch her breath, he immediately fired at the ground, the gunfire dense like firecrackers, continuing to shatter the broken glass, scattering it onto her. "Ah ah ah ah!" She could not care that the ground was covered in shards. Instinctively, she struggled to evade his gunfire. He fired several shots in succession until the chamber was empty. Without even looking, he skillfully removed the empty shells with one hand, smiling with satisfaction as he said, "Was that fun? Do you want more?" Her feet were stepping on the broken glass, blood oozing profusely. She remembered staying at her uncle's house in Florida, watching street performers walk barefoot on shards of glass and hot coals without a scratch. Now, these glass shards were deeply embedded in her flesh. "Please, let me go, don't," she cried out in pain, the fear of death and the agony in her feet forcing her to plead for mercy from this devil. "All right, poor thing. Your tears soften my heart." He approached her, his black leather boots crunching on the glass shards. She stood rigidly on the broken glass, barefoot, as he roughly pulled down the bedsheet wrapped around her. His arm encircled her slender waist, forcefully pulling her against his chest. Her soft front pressed against him, and she could clearly feel the strong heartbeat of his heart within his firm chest beneath the thin shirt. She thought he would surely carry her to the bed, as there was only one large bed in this room. The bedsheet that had been wrapped around her was now only a disheveled blanket on the bed, with a white goose-down pillow and a snow-white mattress remaining. Her chastity would inevitably be lost on this pure white surface, but she hoped he wouldn't simply throw her down on the ground, which was covered in broken glass. She would be harmed beyond recognition. Stubbornness. Kanye curled up on the bed, looking at her scarred feet. Tears of grievance fell. It seemed she had cried all the tears of her life in just a few days, and she couldn't help but sigh at her fate. She regretted it deeply. First, she shouldn't have been so willful in her youth, ignoring her father's advice to study music at a church school in America and be a good girl. Instead, she secretly switched to medicine. Second, she shouldn't have volunteered to join the Red Cross and recklessly come to a Nazi camp. Third, she shouldn't have naively thought she could change anything. In a fit of passion, she was punished by that witch guard, Margaret, and imprisoned as a criminal in the concentration camp. She truly regretted it because they were a pack of real wolves, and he was the king of beasts, a bloodthirsty devil. She was just a little girl, full of passion but utterly powerless against a brutal enemy. She feared pain and humiliation and dreaded death even more. Her opponent was too powerful. He was not in a hurry to swallow her whole but, like a wolf savoring its prey, slowly eroded her thoughts, making her aware of his ruthless methods that were so irresistible while simultaneously casting a spell of gentleness over her. He still did that, lightly tapping on the door with 2 fingers before entering uninvited. She stared at him warily. "What do you want?" "I have some gifts for you." He smiled slightly, pulled her down from the bed, and, holding her arm, dragged her into another room. This room was almost identical in furniture arrangement to the previous one, but the bed was adorned with many beautiful boxes of various colors and sizes. She stood behind him. He first opened the largest box, and Kenyi instinctively covered her eyes. What could this vampire-like man possibly reveal from the box? To her surprise, it contained an exquisitely luxurious golden evening gown. She could tell that the fabric was made from high-quality silk from her homeland. Every spring, her mother would send the butler to the tailor to make new clothes for the sisters, and she had a few dresses made of silk. But that was back in her hometown. These silks had traveled across the ocean to Europe, and their price could rival gold. That wasn't all, the gown was embroidered with intricate golden threads. She knew the value of such craftsmanship. Even in her wealthy family, they would commission someone to embroider a golden threaded vest only for the grandmother's birthday, which her father would present as a precious gift to win her favor. "I know you want a dress. How about this one? Do you like it?" He leaned back against the bed, a smile playing on his seductive lips, raising his head to gaze into her eyes. The perfect combination of material and craftsmanship, like a work of art. She stood silently beside him. The dress was indeed magnificent, but she had no idea what scheme he was brewing. "Perhaps you'll like this." He gently opened another narrow box, and her eyes unconsciously looked inside. "Ah, how beautiful!" She couldn't help but sigh softly in her heart. It was a long shawl made of purple marten fur, luxurious and exquisite, shimmering with a pure luster. His long fingers reached into the box, the fluffy, soft fur rolling like waves in his hand. He then lowered his head, resting his high nose on the soft fur, gently blowing a breath, and raised his ice-blue eyes, gazing at her alluringly. "What fine fur, pure as snow, without a single impurity. Women would go to great lengths to obtain this. She turned her face away silently, refusing to look into his eyes. He gently set down the purple marten shawl, a dazzling light flashing across her face. She looked back at the bed, and the item before her made her gasp in astonishment. This time, he took out a diamond-studded necklace from a velvet box, densely packed with diamonds of all sizes, each one sparkling brilliantly. He held the necklace with the index fingers of both hands. Each diamond is of superior cut and fire, don't think it's cheap. I am a perfectionist. Indeed, it was a perfect diamond necklace. She had never seen so many diamonds in her life. The women in her hometown loved jade, while the American girls at the church school were crazy about diamonds. Regardless, this necklace dazzled her eyes. She controlled herself not to be swayed by these luxurious clothes and jewelry. The more beautiful and expensive these items were, the more they illustrated the extravagance and debauchery of these Nazi officers, who plundered the people's wealth. Noticing her steadfastness and stubbornness, he solemnly opened the most exquisite square box. "Perhaps you'll like this." "This? What is this?" she couldn't help but ask. He held up a pair of transparent crystal shoes in his palm. They were truly a pair of crystal-carved shoes, flawless and sparkling, with very high and pointed heels, seemingly reinforced with golden filigree. These shoes seemed to pull her into a fairy tale world, the story of the Brothers Grimm, where an ordinary girl was mistreated by her stepmother, and a kind fairy gifted her a pair of crystal shoes, which allowed the handsome prince who loved her to recognize her among many girls. Kanye couldn't help but reach out to touch the crystal shoes, they were simply too beautiful. The man before her was 100 times more handsome than any prince in a fairy tale. It was as if he had guessed her thoughts. Jacob Grimm, Wilhelm Grimm, those brothers who practiced romanticism indeed wrote a beautiful story. "I am glad you like this gift." His ice blue eyes sparkled with a chilling light, pulling her back from her dreamy state. "What do you want?" Why was he giving her so many precious gifts? She had nothing worth buying, she was just a Red Cross nurse, with no military secrets to offer. If it was merely to possess her body, she was already in his hands, he could do whatever he wanted with her. "Accompany. I want you to be my princess." He lowered his eyes, looking at the floor. Her feet were covered in wounds, and she was standing barefoot on the cold floor. Her hair was cut unevenly, showing no signs of any princess potential. "Miss Gianna, I am now inviting you to accompany me to the ball tonight. You have 10 minutes to prepare yourself. Remember, only 10 minutes. His words, though polite, were utterly irresistible. Just as he turned to leave, 2 burly maids entered without hesitation. They pinned her down on the bed and began dressing her. 10 minutes later, he appeared at the door, already changed into a specially tailored black uniform of the SS. If it weren't for the evil symbols, she might have thought this extremely fitted black suit was custom-made for some royal prince. "My Cinderella has truly become a princess," he said, his ice blue eyes sparkling as he generously praised her. "But it seems Cinderella does not like her crystal shoes. I can't wear these shoes. If I'm going to a ball, give me a normal pair of shoes." She glared at him fiercely. "What Cinderella? Let those fairy tales go to hell. It was not some fairy godmother giving her shoes, but this devil. He was doing this to torment her." She was already unaccustomed to wearing such high-heeled shoes, especially since her feet were still covered in wounds from the broken glass last night. And those two burly women insisted on forcing her to wear these impossible shoes. At his gesture, the two maids retreated. He slowly approached her, kneeling on one knee, gently slipping a shoe onto her left foot, the force so gentle it was irresistible. As the shoe slid onto her foot, she felt a sharp pain. Her foot was being crushed by the hard shoe, causing unbearable agony. She bit her lip as he forced her wounded foot into the 10-centimeter high crystal shoe. "Very good, perfect." He cradled her foot, trapped in the crystal shoe, a smile playing on his red lips. "It hurts," she couldn't help but cry out, tears welling in her dark eyes. "If it weren't for your defiance last night, you wouldn't be suffering now. But a little hardship is good for you. Women must pay a price for beauty." He slipped the other shoe onto her right foot, cradling her foot and kissing the arch that was bent in pain. "My little mermaid. No, it hurts." She could barely stand. He supported her with both hands, pulling her up. She lost her balance and fell toward him. He gently wrapped one arm around her slender waist. "What a passionate little thing. Do you want to knock me down on the bed?" "Not yet. The driver is waiting for us downstairs." He dragged her down the stairs, limping, and stuffed her into a black car. Night fell, and it was dark around her. She had no idea where she was being taken until the car stopped in front of a magnificent castle. He gentlemanly exited first, opened the car door for her, and then, with polite words and a commanding tone, asked her to get out. He led her into a brilliantly lit hall. Dressed in silk from her homeland, adorned with a precious purple marten shawl and a top-tier diamond necklace, she looked so delicate, graceful, and petite, with a hint of shyness and vulnerability, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Undoubtedly, the women's gazes were all on him, while the men looked at her. "My little mermaid, you should be best at dancing barefoot on the edge of a knife." He took her hand and stepped onto the flower-strewn red carpet under the watchful eyes of the crowd, seemingly kissing her cheek. "Smile. If I see a single tear from you, I will make you cry enough tonight." He held her close and gracefully led her into the dance floor, swaying with the music. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she dared not let them fall. Her body was light, and her feet could move gracefully because she had studied ballet for 2 years. However, she was wearing those hateful crystal shoes, and her feet were covered in wounds. Even the slightest pressure on her feet sent sharp pain coursing through her. She instinctively leaned closer to him, allowing herself to rely more on his shoulder, relieving some weight from her feet. Finally, one piece ended, and he led her from the center of the dance floor to a resting area. He released her and temporarily stepped away. She leaned against a pillar, panting heavily. "May I have this dance?" A sharply dressed officer approached her, politely asking. "No, sir." She leaned against the pillar, refusing to look up. Her feet were in agony. "But miss..." The officer was puzzled by her harsh refusal and smiled, intending to invite her further. "I said no," she shouted, no longer caring about manners or etiquette. This torment had turned her into a little shrew. "Apologies, sir. She is my dance partner." General Ryan stepped in front of the officer, took her hand, and pulled her into his embrace, leading her back to the center of the dance floor, whispering in her ear, "Your behavior has embarrassed me." She looked up at his handsome face, close enough for him to see the tears swirling in her dark eyes. "I have no obligation to dance with others. You said I was only your dance partner tonight." He glanced down at her feet, the flesh-colored lace stockings already stained with blood. He wrapped his arms around her waist with such force that her feet almost lifted off the ground, sliding her toward the terrace beside the hall. "That's right, you are my exclusive little mermaid." He set her down on a chair, looking down at her with a smile. "If you continue to be as clever as you were this time, your days will be much better. Wait for me here." Tears. The moment his figure left her sight, she immediately bent down and kicked off the crystal shoes that had imprisoned her feet. Men always have a way of binding women's feet, just like the custom of foot binding that was popular in her hometown. Fortunately, her father was an enlightened intellectual, and none of her sisters were subjected to this feudal custom. However, today, in a foreign land, she has endured such excruciating confinement. "Gianna." A deep voice gently called her name from behind. She turned around abruptly, startled. "Dr. Harrison." She stared incredulously at the tall man in a tailcoat. Harrison looked equally excited. "Gianna, it really is you. I recognized you right away, but that handsome SS officer kept dancing with you, so I didn't dare approach you easily. Dr. Harrison, I never expected to see you here." Tears finally burst forth from Kenyi's eyes. She couldn't believe fate favored her. She wanted to throw herself into Dr. Harrison's arms immediately. Dr. Harrison embraced her arms gently, comforting her. "That day, when I was about to call you to leave the camp, those soldiers said you had already left and pushed me out without explanation. I realized something might have happened to you and immediately reported it to the president and others. Everyone inquired in various ways, but we never found out your whereabouts. So, I came here as a journalist, and I never expected to see you again." Harrison's words trailed off as he noticed the lovely Western girl was continuously sobbing, seemingly bearing an immense grievance. He took out a handkerchief and wiped her tear-streaked face. "Are you all right?" That Nazi female guard in the camp subjected the female prisoners to inhumane abuse. I exposed her evil deeds to her face, and she covered my mouth with ether, then imprisoned me like a criminal. Is that so? But now you, Harrison examined her attire: the diamond necklace, the purple mink shawl, the dress made of fine silk. No matter which country, a lady active in the upper echelons of society would be dressed like this. This is a long story, Dr. Harrison. Please help me, I've been kidnapped by a Nazi officer. She clutched his hand tightly, he was her only hope. Please, take me away now. I will definitely save you. Harrison's eyes flickered as he looked around to ensure no one was paying attention. He took her hand. Come with me, my car is parked in the yard outside. Ah! Just as she tried to get up, the pain in her feet made her unable to stand. What's wrong with your feet? Dr. Harrison squatted down, lifting the hem of her silk dress embroidered with gold thread. His brows furrowed tightly. My God! He examined the wounds. His medical experience told him that her injuries were caused by something like glass. They had clearly been treated carefully but had reopened. Gianna, what happened to these scars? Did they beat and abuse you? Don't worry about the wounds, just take me away from this place. Harrison nodded. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pretending to be a couple as they walked through the crowd out of the hall. My car is parked in the parking lot over there by the lawn, Harrison said to her. She saw the car and hope ignited in her heart again. She took Dr. Harrison's hand, barefoot on the grass, and recklessly ran toward the car in the yard. Getting closer, she could finally escape this place, escape the inhumane torment, escape that bloodthirsty devil. Just thinking about it made her forget the pain in her feet, and she ran wildly. As she got closer to Dr. Harrison's car, Kenyi felt like a sprinter, putting all her strength into the sprint. The car was right in front of her. As long as Dr. Harrison started the engine, she could leave this den of evil. She ran swiftly, only hearing the rushing wind in her ears when suddenly, there was a muffled bang, as if it came from the heavens. Escape! Kenyi felt the warm hand that had been holding her suddenly let go, and an ominous premonition rose in her heart. She slowly turned around and saw Dr. Harrison collapse on the ground, bright red blood soaking into the grass. A bullet had pierced through his skull from behind them. Oh my God! She covered her mouth and screamed. At first, Harrison's brown eyes were still blinking, but his pupils dilated, and the light of life quickly faded. She didn't have time to grieve the doctor's death because she saw a ghostly, slender black figure standing at the brightly lit entrance of the hall. It was him, that blonde-haired, blue-eyed devil, holding a long gun in his hand. From such a distance, he had still accurately hit him. She didn't know if she could escape under his gun, but her instinct for survival drove her to flee toward the bushes. Soldiers, drawn by the gunfire, had already gathered around Dr. Harrison's fallen body. They stood at attention and saluted the elegantly dressed General Ryan, who had hurried over. "General, what happened?" "An enemy spy, I shot him." His handsome face bore no expression. A soldier rummaged through Dr. Harrison's jacket pocket and read aloud, "Harrison, Red Cross, American journalist." The soldier raised an eyebrow and tossed the notebook beside the corpse. "It seems there was a woman with him. She ran into the bushes. She won't get away." Ryan squinted his icy blue eyes and threw the MP-44 assault rifle to the soldier, drawing the sword from his waist. The long dagger glinted coldly in the moonlight, clearly more than just an ornament on his splendid attire. She struggled forward through the bushes, her purple mink shawl long gone, branches tearing at her silk dress. She felt like she had been running for centuries. The thorns in the bushes were dense and dark. When she suddenly turned back, she realized she could no longer escape. His ghostly black figure had appeared before her, the dagger in his hand parting the thorns as he approached her. Finally, he reached her side. She looked up along the black boots to meet his icy blue eyes, which released a chill that instantly froze her. All she could do was tremble, shedding helpless tears under the glinting blade. "My princess, has midnight arrived, and the magic lost its effect that you must flee in a panic?" His tone was surprisingly gentle, but his actions and gaze were equally brutal. He suddenly grabbed her hair and dragged her out of the bushes. She was pulled along, rolling and crawling, gradually unable to support herself. Her feet bore not only the wounds from the broken glass of yesterday but also scratches from the thorns in the bushes. Her ankle twisted painfully from his rough dragging. "Ah, my ankle!" The pain contorted her face, and she collapsed to the ground. He showed no sign of compassion, hoisting her arm and dragging her with her injured ankle across the lawn. She saw two soldiers carrying Dr. Harrison's corpse and suddenly broke down. "Harrison? No. What was he to you?" He stopped and coldly stared at her. "No, Harrison." It was as if she hadn't heard his question. She let her long-suppressed sorrow pour out at that moment, lunging toward Harrison's body. "You killed him, you devil! You killed Dr. Harrison, you might as well kill me too." "I don't want to live anymore," shouted, instinctively knowing that it was better to understand life immediately than to fall into his hands. "Kill you?" He looked down, his tone icy as he asked. A flash of ferocity crossed his icy blue eyes as he used the tip of his dagger to tease her disheveled black hair. Her fragile neck trembled under the sharp blade. Indeed, he only needed to apply a little force to sever her head from her body. Her dark eyes sparkled with glistening tears as she knelt on the ground, waiting in despair for the arrival of the god of death. "You must be ready to face death at any time, but not now. You need to pay the price for your foolish escape." "General." He dragged her down a narrow corridor, at the end of which was a door, locked with a large padlock, blocking the only escape route. He suddenly threw her aside, and her body lost balance, crashing heavily against the door. With a clang, she leaned against the door with both hands, slowly sinking to the ground, the violent impact nearly making her dizzy. She opened her eyes, trying hard to prop herself up. But her ankle was completely dislocated, and the immense pain made it impossible for her to stand. He remained silent, his ice-blue eyes fixed on her, his gaze sharp and ruthless like a blade, driving her to the brink of collapse. Compared to the pain in her ankle, she found this immense psychological pressure even harder to bear. Don't do this, she shook her head repeatedly, driven nearly mad by this silent torment. A hint of amusement flickered in his ice-blue eyes. Her will was so weak, her capacity to endure pain so limited, yet she dared to try to escape under his nose. If he hadn't noticed in time, perhaps her companions would have rescued her. The fact that a woman almost escaped from his grasp was truly a great joke. Don't do this? Then what do you want me to do to you? No, please don't. She knew he would not let her go this time, curling up beside the iron door, feeling more helpless than ever. He did not lunge at her but coldly repeated a question, that dead American man, what was he to you? This devil killed Dr. Harrison. Thinking of how Dr. Harrison had died under his gun to save her, tears gushed from her eyes again. With Dr. Harrison's death, her hope of survival also vanished, and grief made her tremble all over. I asked what he was to you. He was a medical doctor, a Red Cross physician. He was my superior and my best friend. His eyes flickered for a moment, a slight smile at the corner of his lips. He infiltrated the Countess's ball under the guise of a reporter. I have reason to believe he was a spy for the enemy. Her heart filled with righteous indignation at his baseless accusations and the tragic death of Dr. Harrison. She thought to herself that she was doomed anyway, so she unleashed her heartfelt fury. He was not a spy. What right do you have to kill him? You devil! He grabbed the lace of her dress at her chest, pulling her close to him, his ice-blue eyes mere inches from hers. You should know that this doesn't require a reason. Here, you must obey my rules. Look at these beautiful tears, are you crying for his death? He whispered in her ear, and she looked at him in fear, her eyes wide. Are you like that whore Margaret, eager to climb into my bed? He seized her collar, and with a rip, the expensive silk dress tore apart in his grasp. He restrained her hands, slowly moving to her chest, like a vampire biting into its prey. Then, as you wish. No, please don't. He couldn't do this, not in this corridor where someone might come at any moment. She had nowhere to escape and could only struggle desperately. His strength was too great, she couldn't resist. But in the scuffle, her nails unexpectedly left a deep scratch on his jaw, and the pain made him loosen his grip. He touched his cheek, a smear of bright red blood suddenly staining his fingers. This woman had actually drawn blood from him. He did not immediately slap her across the face but instead stomped down hard on her injured ankle. Ah! His black leather boot came down heavily on her injured ankle, the intense pain nearly making her faint. Kanye truly wished to lose consciousness from the pain so she wouldn't have to endure the humiliation. However, as her ankle throbbed, he leaned closer to her, lifting her body but not doing anything further. "I will teach you what obedience means." Lieutenant Margaret, the female officer in the camp, never dreamed she would see General Ryan again. Of course, she had seen him countless times in her dreams. In her mind, he was the idol of numerous girls, the most perfect man in the empire, with the devilishly handsome face and iron-fisted methods. All of this made Margaret worship him immensely, driving her to madness. Entering with him were 2 SS soldiers carrying a woman, the Red Cross nurse. Kanye was covered in mud, and her feet were injured. These minor wounds seemed insignificant to Margaret. After a few days apart, the girl looked like she had not fared well, but Margaret was both surprised and furious that she was still alive. Even standing quietly, the handsome and tall figure of General Ryan made Margaret's heart flutter. Moreover, his beautiful face wore a charming smile, and his sapphire blue eyes were fixed on her, leaving Margaret almost spellbound. "Lieutenant Margaret, I greatly admire your abilities, so I would like to personally ask you for a favor." "Thank you for the compliment, General. What can I do for you?" Margaret moved closer to him until she could see the shadows cast by his golden, curly eyelashes on his high nose. "This task will not be difficult for you." His gaze fell on Kanye, who was being held down on the bench by 2 soldiers. "I would like to ask you to teach this woman to obey. I believe you will do very well." A meaningful smile appeared on his handsome face. "Of course, General," Margaret replied. "Teaching a lesson is always my forte. I will reward you well. May I ask, General, what if this girl is stubborn and refuses to comply?" Margaret's beautiful eyes turned to Kanye, habitually tapping the steel whip in her right hand against her left palm. "Do as you please," he said, walking to the side of the bench, his long fingers gliding over Kanye's delicate cheek. Her black pupils widened in fear. He intended to hand her back over to that witch, which was far worse than letting her die. Margaret snorted coldly, glaring fiercely at Kanye's face. "I will follow your orders. I believe that after this education, she will completely submit." "Very well. I will come to take her away in a week." He glanced at Kanye, curled up on the bench, then turned to walk toward the door. "But General, why not stay a little longer?" Margaret was unwilling to miss this opportunity to be alone with him. In the past, with those handsome male guards, she only needed to give them a little spark, and they would come to her room for a rendezvous at night. But facing General Ryan, she had no confidence at all. He was so handsome and elegant, yet so proud and unapproachable. She decided to throw caution to the wind and hinted to him, "I have prepared some French wine and would like to share it with you." He remained unmoved, saying at the door, "In 7 days, you will naturally receive your reward." Margaret glared hatefully at his tall figure as he walked away, her gaze falling on Kenyi. Margaret yanked Kenyi off the bench, her heavy military boots stepping on Kenyi's shoulder, the steel whip falling beside Kenyi's cheek. She reflexively closed her eyes, but the whip did not cut her skin. Margaret tapped the tip of the steel whip against Kenyi's face. "You yellow-skinned whore, what skills do you have to seduce the soldiers of the Empire?" "I didn't seduce anyone." Kenyi could no longer endure the insults. To her, this female devil and that devilish general were a match made in hell. "Humph, don't think that just because you have the general's orders, I can't whip you. There are many ways to make you wish you were dead. If you have the guts, kill me. Your devilish superior will make you pay." Margaret grabbed Kenyi's black hair, saying viciously, "I will kill you, but I won't let you die so easily. Slapping you now, even if your face swells, it will heal in 7 days." Margaret signaled to the 2 female guards, and the 2 fierce women each held Kenyi's shoulders while one began to slap her face hard. Before long, her cheeks were marked with red prints, and blood flowed from her nostrils and mouth. Seeing Kenyi beaten to the point of bleeding from her 7 orifices, Margaret finally felt a sense of relief. She signaled to stop. Unexpectedly, Kenyi did not plead for mercy. Instead, she glared at Margaret's face, cursing, "You witch! You are not even human. You are all beasts. You will not have a good end. Don't let this whore's blood stain the book. You too, clean her up." The 2 guards understood and roughly dragged Kenyi to the sink. Margaret turned on the faucet, and Kenyi watched as the water gushed into the basin, splashing onto her face from time to time. Although she had no idea what they were planning, she knew it couldn't be anything good. Before long, the water had filled the basin to 3/4. Margaret turned off the faucet and beckoned to the 2 guards, "Come on, my angels, clean the blood off her face well." No, Kenyi barely had time to scream before the 2 guards grabbed her by the hair and pushed her down into the sink. The cold water choked her airway, and she dared not open her mouth. The suffocating feeling became more and more pronounced as her limbs struggled desperately, but her head was firmly held under water by the 2 female guards. Minutes passed, and she gradually lost consciousness, fainting away. "Lieutenant, is she going to die?" one of the burly female guards asked with some concern. "Don't worry, her worthless life won't end so quickly." Margaret watched as Kenyi was pulled out of the water, truly unconscious. This woman is not like the others. If she really dies, General Ryan will hold us accountable. We can't afford that. Let's leave it at that for today. Lock her in a cell, and don't give her anything to eat tonight. It's fine, we still have 6 days to take our time. Dangerous. Where am I? Am I dead? Enhanyi opened her eyes, thinking she had returned to heaven. Don't worry, you're still alive. A pair of delicate girl's hands gently caressed her face. Enhanyi recognized this girl, the blonde girl was the one she had saved when she first arrived at the concentration camp as a Red Cross nurse. Enhanyi had thought she wouldn't speak English, but her English was quite fluent. "I'm sorry for saving you that day. I didn't have a chance to thank you. You've been unconscious for 8 hours. Here, have some water and bread, eat a little." The girl's eyes were filled with concern. After drinking a few sips of water and eating a piece of hard bread, Enhanyi finally regained some clarity and said gratefully, "Thank you for sharing your food with me, but what will you eat?" The girl smiled mysteriously, "You don't need to worry about that." She pulled a piece of bread from her prison uniform pocket. Perhaps because they were bound by fate, this Polish girl named Julia became a close friend with whom Enhanyi could share everything. Julia told Enhanyi many things about the concentration camp, including a shocking fact: young, beautiful girls in the camp would sell themselves to male guards or military doctors to survive. Although Enhanyi knew that in this hell, unbelievable things could happen at any moment, hearing Julia say it out loud filled her with righteous indignation. If they were forced into such humiliation, that would be one thing, but she couldn't understand why they would voluntarily do such things. What? Does that mean they disregard their dignity? There is no dignity here, only by following the rules can you survive. Sometimes, doing this is to avoid a beating, and sometimes, it's just for a piece of bread. Julia pointed to a tall, beautiful girl in the next cell. "Look at Eva, she was originally a soldier." At first, she resisted fiercely, but later she gradually got used to it. Her protector is a captain who is a military doctor. Actually, it doesn't matter if the person is ugly or fat, the higher the rank, the better. But to be honest, ugly men are better than handsome ones because the handsome military doctor, Lieutenant Robert, cared for me, and that Margaret would whip me. She whispered in Julia's ear, "Dr. Robert is actually Margaret's lover." Enhanyi snorted coldly, thinking that Margaret was utterly shameless. If you want to survive, it's best to find an opportunity and get a protector, Julia kindly advised. Protector? Enhanyi lowered her head, staring at the demonic symbols on the wall. The higher the rank, the better? According to Julia, she was fortunate to have the protection of General Ryan, who was not only handsome but looked like a noble deity, yet he was also cruel to the extreme. "Julia, someone is looking for you." A female guard approached and gave her a knowing look. Enhanyi anxiously grasped Julia's arm. "Don't worry, I'll be back soon." Julia stood up, adjusted her prison uniform, and tidied her blonde hair. Enhanyi had already learned from her cellmate Julia that this military doctor, Lieutenant Robert, was a complete lecher. His brown hair was greasy, slicked back against his head, and his tone was pretentiously elegant and blindly confident. Lieutenant Robert smiled as he stared at Enhanyi's face. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Your name is Gianna, right? What a lovely name, it reminds me of a flower that grows in my hometown." Robert put on white gloves, showing no trace of the cruelty typical of Nazi officers, like a barber ready to serve her. His hands adjusted her head, parting her black hair. "Gianna, what a lovely black-haired angel! Why is your hair missing some?" Enhanyi lowered her head and did not respond to his words. Even as he leaned closer, the strong scent of hair oil mixed with perfume made her feel nauseous. She remained calm, the mirror reflecting her stubborn face and the lewd Nazi doctor in a military cap and white coat. Suddenly, the handsome face of General Ryan flashed in her mind, his ghostly smile, his icy, piercing gaze, and the dangerous heat radiating from him made her shudder at the thought. Whispered, "Robert, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Margaret's high-pitched voice rang out. Robert quickly withdrew his arm from Enhanyi's shoulder. "Margaret, what are you doing here? Where have you been?" "I was just conducting a routine examination. I warned you not to have any funny ideas about her." Margaret snorted coldly. "Don't be angry, you're my goddess, why bother getting upset over this inferior little girl?" Clearly, Lieutenant Robert was very afraid of this female demon. "Do you want to know why? Then I'll tell you clearly." Margaret glanced at Enhanyi. "This African girl is the leader of the SS secret organization, General Ryan's person." Ignoring the shocked expression on Dr. Robert's face, Margaret ordered 2 female guards to take Enhanyi to another room. Enhanyi looked at the beautiful face of the female officer, unable to associate it with her venomous heart. The pain of choking on water from yesterday resurfaced in her mind. "I really underestimated you. Your ability to seduce men is quite impressive," Lieutenant Margaret teased, lifting Enhanyi's black hair and tapping a few times on her delicate skin. "Today is the 2nd day, let's see what we can do. If you want me to read that book again, then your plans will fall through." Enhanyi stared defiantly at the aggressive Margaret, knowing that this woman was a paper tiger who wouldn't dare to truly harm her. "Hat, you're really tough." Margaret ordered 2 soldiers to bring in an iron chair. The chair itself was unremarkable, but it was connected to a complex web of wires, sending chills down Enhanyi's spine. Could this be the legendary electric chair? "What do you want to do?" she shouted in panic. Margaret was delighted by Enhanyi's fear. Before she could give the order, the 2 female guards bound Enhanyi to the chair, and Margaret pressed a switch. "Ah!" Enhanyi screamed as waves of electricity coursed through her body, causing excruciating pain. Margaret grinned, turning the switch up higher, and under the impact of the massive current, Enhanyi fainted again. This electric shock left Enhanyi unconscious for a full day and night. Lieutenant Margaret had to carry her to the medical room in the middle of the night and let her lover, Dr. Robert, administer N4. On the morning of the 4th day, Enhanyi finally woke up. Her pulse was very weak, and her mind was still foggy. Margaret wanted to intensify her torment, but Robert's words made her think calmly about the severity of the situation. She's very weak now and can't withstand any beatings or punishments. If you continue to abuse her, I won't be able to save her. Humph! Don't think I don't know what you're up to. Think whatever you like. Dr. Robert shrugged. Her life or death is of no concern to me. Margaret shot him a glance and turned to leave the medical room. But she didn't leave. Instead, she stood outside the door, glaring fiercely at Dr. Robert as he changed the bandages for the barely breathing Enhanyi. Do you really think I would send you back to the general unharmed? Since you enjoy showing off so much, let's see you flaunt it in front of men. By evening, she finally regained consciousness. The first thing she saw was Lieutenant Robert, who was sitting at a desk in the sick room, writing something in a notebook. It was very quiet around, and outside, a light rain was falling. She didn't know how many days she had been unconscious. This week had been so torturous, with that female demon Margaret doing everything she could to torment her, wishing she could tear her to pieces. Would it be any better to return to General Ryan? My angel, you finally woke up. Dr. Robert walked over to her, unceremoniously picking up the stethoscope from his chest to check her condition. The cold stethoscope slipped under her clothing, moving slowly across her chest, and he smiled. She furrowed her brow, wanting to avoid him, but her limbs had no strength, and even moving a finger was difficult. Her throat was dry and parched, and she couldn't speak at all. You are out of danger now, but Margaret wouldn't say the same. You know, she's a very jealous woman, and she's beautiful, yes, a real femme fatale. Dr. Robert leaned closer to Enhanyi's ear and whispered, "This is our little secret. You can stay in the medical room, and I'll protect you." Humiliated. Enhanyi snorted coldly in her heart. The so-called protection was nothing but teasing and another form of torment. However, Julia's words had some truth. She had to survive first. Water, I want water, she looked into Robert's brown eyes and said. Of course, what a good girl you are. He patted Enhanyi's cheek. I'll get you some water. Dr. Robert also brought her a white pill. Take this, it's a fever reducer. Your wound on your foot hasn't healed yet. You're still a bit feverish. Enhanyi had no choice but to swallow the pill, and soon, she fell into a drowsy sleep again. She didn't know why, but her body felt heavy as if a huge lead ball was pressing down on her. It was a deep night, and everything around was dark. She opened her eyes but couldn't see anything. Suddenly, she woke up. It wasn't a lead ball at all. A lecherous man was lying on top of her, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and hair oil, and she immediately recognized who this man was. No. Dr. Robert. Don't do this. She struggled to push him away. Margaret. I miss you, come on, let's. She couldn't understand why Dr. Robert was so drunk that he mistook her for Margaret. But she couldn't let him succeed. I'm not Margaret, wake up. No. Her body was weak and powerless, and she couldn't resist this man at all. The lights in the medical room suddenly turned on, the brightness blinding like daylight. 2 SS officers pulled Robert off her and dragged him to the corner. Enhanyi saw the dark crowd in front of her, which included the female demon Margaret, the female guards, and several black-clad SS officers. A ghostly voice rang out, "I feel very sorry." As that voice spoke, a tall, slender figure in black stepped in from outside the door, slightly bowing his head to survey the scene in the sick room. His ice-blue gaze fell on the female guard Margaret. "Lieutenant, it seems you have mistaken my intelligence agency for a decoration. General Ryan, please forgive me, this girl is just too stubborn and unreasonable. I only wanted to tame her," Margaret explained with difficulty. "But I really don't know how this happened." He ignored her explanation, glanced at the drunken Dr. Robert lying on the floor, and a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. "It's unfortunate that you did not follow my orders. I had intended to reward you in a special way. General, please give me another chance." Margaret turned to him, speaking urgently. He walked past her and directly approached the bed. "Lieutenant, you need not be upset. This will not ruin your future in the military, as it is merely a private secret order." He leaned down gently over the bed toward her. With her eyes half closed, she saw his figure in a black uniform coat gradually approaching. Her cheek brushed against the cold metal on his chest. His sleeves and coat carried a chill, and he forcefully lifted her from the bed, enveloping her in a shroud of cold darkness. He carefully cradled her in his arms as if she were a rare treasure passing through the corridors of the concentration camp. An officer opened the door for him, and outside, the rain was heavy. Several soldiers in black raincoats waited by his car, and 2 officers held open large black umbrellas on either side of him. He laid Enhanyi across the back seat and then sat down next to the driver in the front. The car slowly started, moving slowly through the torrential rain and mud. She curled up in the back seat, catching a glimpse of his high nose and pointed chin in the rear-view mirror, his ice-blue eyes obscured by darkness. In fact, he had long known about Margaret's plot through his omnipresent intelligence network and had only saved her at the last moment. She rested her head against the cold car window, the outside pitch black and the rain pouring down. She knew she was running a high fever, her throat was dry, and her chest felt like it was on fire. Perhaps when Lieutenant Robert had forced himself on her, she shouldn't have struggled. If she had been humiliated by someone else, she wouldn't have fallen into the hands of this devil. Would that have been better? She had no strength to think anymore, her whole being was in a daze. The plump. When she regained a bit of consciousness again, he had already carried her out of the car, holding her as he walked up to the top floor, gently placing her on the large bed in the attic room. The moment her body touched the soft sheets, he descended upon her like a vampire that had just fallen from the rooftop. She felt no heavy pressure from his body, only the overwhelming intensity of his gaze. His eyes shone brightly, and the back of his gloved hand brushed across her forehead, gently playing with her hair. "Poor little thing, my angel, now you should know that the most cruel in this world are not the men with guns, but the women filled with jealousy. Let me guess, what did she do to you?" Her skin was burning hot, she was running a high fever. "It seems there are no visible injuries on the surface of your skin." His ice blue eyes fixed on her delicate forehead, where there was a small scar that would be hard to notice unless one looked closely. Electric shock, drowning, needle pricks, he seemed to be heartbroken, gently kissing the scorching mark on her temple. "That wicked woman still harmed your body." She couldn't help but tremble, unable to endure his feigned compassion, knowing full well it was he who had sent her to that hellish concentration camp, and now he was here making light of it. "What do you want me to do?" She couldn't help but cry out, her tears were scalding, fueled by her fever. If he merely wanted her body, he could have ravaged her countless times already. If he aimed to destroy her will, then she was already utterly defeated. "What a steadfast girl you are! All you need to do is maintain a submissive attitude, obey all my commands, and that's it." The corners of his lips curled into a seductive smile. "This isn't hard to do. Just think clearly, do you want to stay here, or go back to the camp, or to Dr. Jackson's laboratory? He likes you very much, to the point of obsession." She closed her eyes, the memories of Margaret from the camp causing her pain, and the thought of Dr. Jackson's laboratory filling her with dread. Enhanyi had resigned herself to her fate, she was already in hell. What difference did it make which layer of hell she was in? "It seems I've truly frightened you. This reaction is not good. But it's no wonder, my little angel has just returned from hell. I will let you know that heaven is right next to hell. Let me see what Lieutenant Margaret has taught you besides intimidation." She turned her head away. In Margaret's camp, facing threats and intimidation, and the lewd advances of Lieutenant Robert, she could refuse with words, but in front of him, she couldn't muster the courage to resist. Enhanyi half closed her eyes, her breath faint. This time she had truly resigned herself. Hot tears silently slid down her cheeks. She must have committed a grave sin in her past life to end up in the hands of several perverted Nazis, enduring torment over and over again. She had already contemplated death in her heart. "Father, Mother, please forgive your unfilial daughter. Now that she has fallen into the hands of thieves, she can no longer serve her parents. Sisters, I fear I will never see you again." The long night dragged on, and the rain poured heavily. The curtains were drawn open, and a warm morning sun streamed in through the window. Enhanyi turned her head away, the sunlight was somewhat blinding. She was no longer feverish, but her whole body felt as if it had been crushed. She struggled to sit up. Two maids were tidying up the room, which was in disarray. Her clothes were scattered all over the floor, and a slightly plump woman was bending down, picking them up one by one and putting them into a basket. "Wait," Enhanyi spoke up. The plump woman looked up, staring at her with indifference. Please leave me one piece. Even a prison uniform was better than being draped in a sheet. The plump woman exchanged glances with another woman, their indifferent expressions seemingly mocking her silently. I want my clothes, please give them to me, okay? She pleaded, looking at the two women. Miss, the general has ordered that these clothes be burned because they are dirty. The plump woman finally spoke, her tone harsh and unfeeling. Please get out of bed, we need to wash the sheets and blankets. The other tall, thin woman also approached. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.